to see. Do you know what it's like to be blind? I have only one experience that may have come close to that. It was many years ago. I was in my house watching TV in the basement, and many of us have basements here. We know that there's not much light, there's not much small windows. And this was in the middle of the night watching television. My daughter was upstairs doing homework. I'm a deacon, by the way. And my wife and son were at his high school doing a school activity. And then all of a sudden, without any warning, total blackout. Power lost the entire house. And I'm in my basement, pitch black. Did not have my phone with me or anything. The kind of darkness where you stick your hand in your face, you are not going to see your hand. And I was trying, my eyes were adjusting to the sudden darkness. And I was panicked because I didn't have, it says here, they didn't have any source of light. And then I heard my daughter called from upstairs, "Dad, Dad." She was panicked, just like I was. And the only thing that I could do, I realized, to get up to her was I literally dropped down on the ground and just started crawling, making my way, feeling my way in the darkness to the stairs to get up out of the basement, and then realizing that it was a blackout in the entire subdivision because even the street lights were out, and the only source of light was from the moon and some of the stars, so I could tell there was some little light. My eyes were adjusting, but all the time, my daughter and I were calling out to her because she was only in middle school at the time. I could tell she was really scared. There was desperation in her voice, and I was saying, "I'm on my way, I'm coming, just stay where you are." That feeling of vulnerability, of fear, of panic, it's real, isn't it? If you've ever experienced anything like that. And I was reminded of that experience as I was reading and reflecting, particularly on this gospel passage. Bartimaeus, the blind man, who had heard about Jesus and heard about the miracles that he was performing, cries out, uses whatever he has, his voice. "Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me." Calling out to Jesus. He realized in that desperation, that desperate moment, this is his only chance. And Jesus is walking by, and he did not want Jesus to miss him, like everybody else who just walks right by him because he's a blind beggar. And then what do people do? Shut up! Be quiet! Don't bother Jesus. That's essentially what they're saying when they rebuked him. They're scolding Bartimaeus. And again, he will not be deterred. "Son of David, have pity on me." And then it's the people, the same people who were rebuking him, who are telling him, after Jesus says, "Call him," what do they say? "Get up. Take courage. Jesus is calling you." Not just Bartimaeus, not just those who were following him. Jesus is calling you. You. Everyone seated here now, Jesus is calling you. And I have 100% proof of that. You got up this morning, opened your eyes, filled your lungs with air, got dressed, and you're here now because Jesus called you here. And you answered, right? You're here because in whatever way, in your heart, in your mind, in your responsibility, in your ministry, whatever it may be, Jesus has called you here. And And notice what Jesus says to Bartimaeus. Your faith has saved you. Jesus didn't touch him like the other blind man with the spittle and the clay on his eyes. He was healed when he heard Jesus say, your faith has saved you. Your faith has saved you. It's your faith that has brought you here to answer Jesus' call. And on Friday, we're going to be celebrating one of the wonderful feasts at our church, the Feast of All Saints. And it reminded me of thinking about saints and if anyone was blind. And I learned of one particular saint. Please show your hands if you're familiar with the name Saint Margaret of Castella. No one heard. Me neither. Saint Margaret of Castella was born in 1287 in the Umbria region of Italy. And when she was born to a wealthy family. But she was born completely blind and had a serious spinal defect, such that she was hunched over and that there was a severe curvature in her spine. Okay? Seriously disabled from birth. And her parents, as I said, they were of noble ancestry, probably had the money and the means to raise her up until she was about age 16. They learned that a saint was buried in their community. I'm sorry, I can't recall the name of the saint. But they brought Margaret to the tomb of that saint, hoping that bringing her there would heal her of her infirmity. And then, when it didn't happen, they abandoned her there at the church. They left her there at the church. There were Dominican nuns there at the convent associated with the church. They left her with them at the age of 16. And as she writes, and they recall, Margaret did not blame her parents for doing that. In fact, she was comforted to know that she would be close to the house of God. So it rings true, right, for Bartimaeus, being abandoned and left behind and forgotten by her own family. But then, after a few months, the Dominican nuns were uncomfortable with the intensity of her prayer life and also experienced the difficulty of raising her with her disability and special needs. And they expelled her from the convent, sent her out into the streets of that town. I know it's shocking, isn't it? But remember, also, well, I'll get back to that. But what happened was in the town, the people responded to her. They took care of her until they learned the Franciscan friars heard of her. They took her in, nurtured her, to the point where she even helped establish a school for children like her with disabilities who were forgotten. Or even at that time, it was very common if a family did not have the money to care for a child born to their family, to leave the child there. And so she is remembered as a saint for the disabled and for also the forgotten and abandoned, especially children. Pope Francis canonized her on April 24th, 2021. Maybe that's one of why many of us are not familiar with who she is. But it was because of her faith that her name rings out even today. And she is an extraordinary source of inspiration and prayer and consolation for people who are disabled and for their family members as well. And we may be thinking that, well, that's wonderful of St. Margaret, but what about those Dominican nuns? Remember in the second reading of the letter to the Hebrews, they're saying there, paraphrase, is that even the priests who are called to serve the people, they don't have necessarily any great talents. Okay? They too are like the people whom they're called to serve. They have their own weaknesses that they pray for and offer up to the Lord in addition to the people. And it's not until God calls you, God calls them, that they are glorified. And it even talks about even Jesus did not glorify himself in his priesthood. It was God. And so even in our own difficulties, in our own weaknesses, it's God who strengthens us. It's the mercy and the grace of God that sustains us. And lastly, I remember, well, not even remember, because it was just last week, many of you may know that we have an adaptive religious education program here at St. Rose. And it was established many years ago by many wonderful people here at St. Rose, and with the support and assistance of Father Mateo, and where our religious education program reaches out to families and children with special needs to give them religious education and catechesis as well. And it was such an successful program, and still is today, that even the Holy Father recognized that program and invited the staff who helped establish it and Father Mateo to the Vatican and to their own audience with the Holy Father, and he personally thanked each one of them. There's a photograph right here, right in the Holy Spirit prayer room of Father Mateo meeting with the Holy Father. And yet, when I met with a few of those families last year, they told me, we want to continue to give transmit the faith to our children, but it's difficult because with their needs, because of their special needs, it's difficult for them to sit in an entire hour here at Mass and to be fully quiet and attentive. So they said to me, Deacon, it's difficult for us to bring them there because we sometimes get some not so welcome looks. We get rebuked at times. They feel that feeling of being rebuked, not welcomed, because of the special need and the condition of their children. And so I, last Sunday, as I do once a month, conducted a special communion service for them and their children in the quiet and the peace of that intimate moment there. What reminds me as well that even today, even here in our own house and even in our own homes, we have the tendency and the weakness to rebuke each other, to turn each other away. And that's where, bringing back this idea, Jesus is calling you, and when he calls you, he's asking you and me, what do you want me to do for you? What do you need? I am here for you. And to think about that for a moment. When we answer his call, come to me. I want to engage with you in prayer, here in Eucharist, anywhere he may be calling you. And remember, Jesus is calling you and me. He's going to IM you, he's going to text you, he's going to DM you, whatever, okay? And I mean that literally, because you may have gotten an instant message or a direct message from someone in need, someone asking for your prayers, someone asking for your assistance, or someone calling you, or directly coming up to you. I need something. That's Jesus calling you. And just like Jesus at that moment, Our call as Christians is to reflect on what our answer is when he calls us. How do we answer? Do we say, Jesus, what do you want me to do for you? Here at St. Rose, within your families, in the communities, in our teen choir, or with our adaptive religious education program, or in whatever ministries here in the church at St. Rose, or anywhere, Jesus is calling you and me. And he's asking and waiting for us to ask him, just like we ask him, what do you want me to do for you?